Call reliable sources. Don't just go with anyone.
Welcome back to Life Worth Chasing. I'm your host, Chase Maher, and this show is about helping entrepreneurs build their business around their dream lifestyle. Today, we have the CEO and co-founder of Growth 1031. He's a total ninja with the legal mechanics of property law. Today, we're going to chat qualified opportunity zones, 1031 exchanges, all that good real estate stuff, because let's be honest, this is a selfish show and I want to learn how to pay less taxes, and so should you. Today, we got Lance Growth on the show. Lance, what's up, bro?
Hanging out, my guy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, no problem. Lance, you and I have known each other for a few years now. We met when I was just starting out being an agent. You were just starting out doing some property law, and we connected. I think a year later, we did a spin class together. Then we connected shop at a couple networking events. And, now that I'm getting more into the flipping and you got your own business, I wanted to bring you on the show to learn about some 1031 exchanges, some opportunity zones, and just really explore the tax havens that you've become a specialist at.
1031 exchange is simple. It's a tax deferral program, and like verbatim, the way the rule is written in the IRS letter ruling, it's a 1031 allows an investor to defer capital gains tax on an exchange of like-kind properties held for business or investment. So this is mainly a deferral program for investment property. The simplest example I always give people is if they purchase a piece of property at $100,000, property, a couple years later appreciates to $200,000. That's $100,000 profit. From that $100,000 profit, the taxes that kick in is going to take, in California, average of roughly 33%. So that's a big chunk out of their profit. And a 1031 exchange allows them to keep that. They just have to follow certain guidelines. They have to purchase the new property equal or greater to what they're selling at the close of escrow. Two other timelines kick in. They have 45 days to identify their replacement property, and then 180 days to actually close escrow and acquire that replacement property.
Fantastic. So I got some feedback from one of my buddies on my show, and I appreciate the feedback. And his feedback was that asking questions that even if I already know the answer to, asking in a way that opens the guest up a little bit. So I'm going to work on this, and we're going to try this today since I do know a little bit about 1031s and op zones. So we're going to go through this. Lance, does that property have to be in the same state, the exchange property?
No, a 1031 exchange is a federal guideline. So it includes all the U.S. states. You can exchange state to state, and the U.S. territories.
And to U.S. territories like Puerto Rico, for example?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And from the time that they sell their investment property, how long do they have until they have to purchase what that next property is called? And then don't some people call that next property a leg up?
Yeah, some people call the property you're selling the down leg, the property you're acquiring the up leg. So as soon as they close escrow on the property they are selling, the down leg, basically the timeline starts ticking that they have 45 days to identify that their up leg, and then 180 days to actually get their name on title to that up leg.
Okay. And so let's say they go through that timeline with, the help and assistance of somebody like you, and they find that up leg, they purchase that up leg, and they want to sell that up leg a couple years later. Do they just never have to pay taxes, or did they get hit with taxes at that point?
No, remember, you're just deferring the taxes. So at the point of sale, if they choose not to do a 1031 exchange, they'll pay not only the taxes for the appreciation in the property they invested into, but they'll also pay the taxes for the appreciation in the property that they relinquished in getting in there. With the 1031 exchange, the only way around that is if the person passes away and they leave the property to their heirs, then the property automatically gets what's called a step up in basis. And that means all the taxes will be absolved and the property will be valued at fair market value.
Okay. And why would an investor want to do a 1031 exchange?
Simple, to keep more money in his pocket, more purchase power.
So more purchase power. That's what I wanted to hear. That's kind of the answer that I was expecting you to say, just because, you're a professional and So I'm trying to lay the picture here. If we have a real estate investor and right now they own a duplex and they have $100,000 in equity in that duplex, They go to sell it. Let's say they pay 6% in cost of sale. So they got 94,000 in equity. They paid 100,000 for it. They want to buy a 5-unit small commercial apartment building. Does it have to be another duplex, or can they buy that 5-unit?
No, you're referring to the first rule, which is what is considered a qualified use. And a qualified use is basically any that's used for business or investment. A lot of people kind of misconstrue this and they think it's like a limiting term, but it's actually extremely liberal, very broad. If you purchase a residential home and you move into that building, you live there, you're domiciled there, that's your home, is your residential home. But you can purchase that same residential home. You don't move in there. You let somebody else live in there and they pay you rent. That means you're using this real estate for business or investment. You can go into an office space, exchange it to an office space, exchange it to a plot of raw land, exchange it to a multi-unit asset, just as long as the real estate is being held for the same qualified use, and that's business or investment.
Got it. And is there a certain point you have to stop doing 1031 exchanges, or could I do, one a year for the next 20 years?
We say swap until you drop.
Swap until you drop. I like that. And who can do 1031 exchanges? Can any real estate investor do them?
Anyone.
Anybody can do them. Okay. And what advice would you have somebody? Let's use that duplex, for example. John Smith has a duplex he bought for 100. 2 years later, it's worth 200. After he fixes it up, he wants to sell it. He'll have about 94K in equity. What kind of advice would you give to John Smith with that duplex, to not necessarily finding a qualified purchase? Leave that up to him. But what kind of advice? Should he contact somebody like you while he's in escrow, or after he sells, or before he puts it up for sale?
Yeah. Contact us. As soon as you accept an offer and you open escrow, you open your exchange account. That is the number one rule I tell everyone, mainly because the entire purpose of our industry is that the client can never be in constructive receipt of the funds. So if escrow closes and we haven't gotten involved and the client has access to the funds, he's actually disqualified from doing a 1031 exchange. So it's pretty difficult conversations I have probably at least once a week, where a real estate agent gives me a call like, hey, we just closed last week. We would like to do an exchange. And I had to give him the sad news. And the last one I did, the client had to pay $770,000 in taxes. Agent called too late.
Wow. Got it. So if you're listening right now, make sure that you don't actually receive the funds from escrow. You actually call somebody like Lance. We're going to put Lance's contact information in the show notes on how you can reach out to him. And before you close escrow, Lance is going to advise on where those funds are going to be sent, and you're not allowed to touch them. Right, Lance?
Exactly.
Okay. Besides that mistake of receiving the funds and then trying to do the 1031 exchange, what are some other pretty common mistakes that you see from investors in 1031 exchanges?
So when you close escrow, you have to ID the property, and that identification has to be made within that 45 days. Sometimes people move so fast, they're like, all right, I sold my property, I'm ready to move on to my next property, but they haven't ID'd it. They haven't put down an address, a price, signed it, said, this is the property that I'm going to be utilizing for my replacement property. And they think sometimes that when they just send me a purchase contract to start drafting our documents for their phase 2, that's considered, identification. But we have to always keep them in line. Like, no, we drafted a wonderful replacement property identification letter for you. Just fill in the blanks. Here's a property address. Here's a price. Here's a date. Sign it. Get it back to me. Email, mail it. But just make sure it's in my hands within 45 days.
Now, is there a specific number of properties they have to identify, or is it just they're only allowed to do one, or can they identify 100 and just pick from whichever one works out for them?
Well, there's just 2 rules to go about it. 2 main rules, basically. The first one's called the 3-property rule. And under that rule, they have 3 options, but there's no limits on the valuation, meaning it can be as expensive as they would like it to be. The second one is called the 200% rule. And under that rule, if they want to identify more than 3, you can switch over to the 200% rule, and they can identify an unlimited number of properties, provided that the aggregated sum doesn't exceed 200% of their initial sales price. And by that, it's just simple. If they sell for $1 million, they're going to go and identify 10, 15 properties, just as long as when I total those properties up in value, it doesn't exceed 2 million, because if they sold for 1 million, 2 million is 200% of 1 million.
Got it. Perfect. My next question was, let's say John Smith has 94K in equity. Can he use that 94K in equity to do more than one 1031 exchange?
Absolutely.
Can you share with me how something like that would work?
With us, if let's say we get 100 grand and they have to spend 100 grand, but they got 2 properties for 50,000. It's just we may hold the money, but we do not do anything unless we're authorized by the client. So, if the client says, hey, I want 50 over here, 50 over here, it's just about having them fill a client wire request where they give us instruction as to how they would like to allocate the funds.
Okay. And 2 more questions on 1031s before we go to op zones. One question is, let's say John Smith only wants to use 50K of the equity or of the cash proceeds, and the other 44 he wants to put in his pocket. How does that work?
Well, he can, but any money he touches is going to be taxable.
Okay. And then my last question on 1031 exchanges is, can you go over just one more time the timelines? So I understand that they have 45 days to ID the properties, and then how many days after that until they have to close or the 1031 is a failed exchange?
So basically, you just have to think about it like this. When you sell a piece of property, your name is coming off title. Title is like considered a birth certificate for properties. When your name gets off title, it's kind of like you're leaving a house, but you're out in the rain. And that rain is considered taxes. Now, you have, as soon as your name gets off there, both timelines kick in at the same time. At the point your name gets off title, you have 45 days to identify. You have 180 days to get back into that house of equal, greater in value. Once if you don't meet those timelines, then the shelter is gone, and then the rain comes down and you're taxed. So it's close of escrow, 45 day, 180 days. Get back in there in 180, ID within 45.
Now, is it equal or greater value to your cash proceeds, or equal or greater value to the sale price of the down leg?
Your net sales price. So basically everything after your non-recurring closing costs. Like, it doesn't include a loan, but it does include agent fees, title fees, escrow fees, all those fees that are incurred at the point of closing. Those will reduce the amount you have to purchase at equal or greater to.
And I just realized I was doing my math wrong. So on a $200,000 house, if we're doing 6% in closing costs, it would be $188,000 with $88,000 net proceeds. So it would be, if he sold it for 200, had 6% in closing costs, it would have to be equal or greater value to 188,000. That would be correct, right?
Correct.
Got it. So let's talk opportunity zones. What are opportunity zones?
Well, basically, in the 2017 Tax Cut and Job Act, it wasn't really broadcast, but it was just a line item that anyone who invests into these specific areas, these areas were chosen by the governors of each state, that if they invest into these areas through going through a proper fund, that they can, one, defer their taxes just like 1031, but except they would have the added benefit that if they stayed in the investment for 5 years, capital gains tax would be exempt, not deferred, exempt by 10%. If they stayed in their investment 7 years, their capital gains tax would actually be exempt 15%. Now, the one little caveat is whatever they're deferring into the property, they have to pay in 2026. Minus the 15% discount. But whatever property they invest into, surely that will appreciate. But if they just hold on to the property for 10 years, then all profits are tax-free.
Thank you for sharing that. Why are they called opportunity zones? Is there like a specific part of the country that this is only work, like certain zones?
Yeah, so this is meant to revitalize low-income areas. The opportunity zones are based on 2010 census records, track records, I forgot what they call them. And they're basically the government's push to say, hey, I know we're in recovery, but we can't just only recover the grade A neighborhoods. There's some damaged areas that need your help. Instead of just, throwing government funding at it, what they did was just incentivize the private sector to go and bring their expertise into these low income areas and pretty much help revitalize them.
Now, is that only for the 50 states or is that also for U.S. territories?
U.S. territories.
Are there any areas in Puerto Rico that are opportunity zones?
Puerto Rico is 98% in an opportunity zone.
Well, you and I are going to have to talk about that because I'm thinking about moving there.
That's funny. Yeah, great time there because with these opportunity zone stuff, with still in recovery from the hurricane, they're just primed to much. It's like to me the hurricane is their 2008. They just got demolished and they're just all in straight recovery. So, sharp people like you go down there and grab a couple properties, you make a killing.
Yeah, man, I'm thinking so. So I forgot to ask this in 1031, but with 1031s or opportunity zones, can I do this? I can't do it with my primary residence where I live, right? So I have to do it with an investment property that I was receiving passive income from, correct? Like rental property.
No, you can do it with the raw land. You can't, if you have just raw land, let's say 10 years ago, we bought raw land downtown. If we paid for it $100,000 back then, it's probably upwards of 12 million for the lots now. We invested into that. That was an investment. So as long as you can prove your intent, and literally what the rule reads is that the person has to have the intent to utilize it for business or investment. As long as you can prove that, you're good. The raw land is changed all the time.
Got it. Now, the thing that was most confusing for me was this 2026 rule, the 5, the 7, the 10. Can we break that down a little bit and go over that? And I'll just ask you some questions about that. So let's use the example again of the duplex that John Smith owns. He paid $100,000. He sold it for $200,000. His non-recurring closing costs were $12,000. So he has, let's just use $88,000 in equity. He wants to go into an opportunity zone. $88,000 in cash proceeds. He wants to go into an opportunity zone, and he selected an area in Florida to buy this fourplex. The fourplex is $205,000, so it's greater or equal value to the net sales price. What happens to him in 2026?
If you said he purchased at 100, sold at 200, that's about 100,000. Let's say average 33%. So he has about 33,000 in capital gains tax. In 2026, he has to pay that, but it will be minus 15%. Now, the property that he invested into, that will appreciate it. He'll appreciate it as well. And once he hit 10 years of holding on to it, it's a tax-free investment on the up leg. Basically, on the up leg is a tax-free investment. But the down leg, once your name gets on title, it produces taxes. You just don't have to pay it at that time, given that you're sheltered by a 1031 or opportunity zone. But with opportunity zones, it has a time limit until when you pay it. Normally with 1031s, you just, next property. With opportunity zones, it's like, next property is tax-free, but you're going to, whatever taxes you pretty much placed on that up leg, you will have to pay in 2026 with a discount of 15%.
So somebody listening might be thinking, well, why would I want to do an opportunity zone if I'm going to have to pay those taxes? And wouldn't you agree that it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain?
Absolutely. I always tell my clients, like, it's a simple math. Look how much money you would have to pay in 2026 with the 15% haircut, and then speculate as to how much money you would have to pay if you didn't get the tax-free for selling your up leg, your replacement property. So it's really just line up the math. There's a growth rate for especially Southern California. See how fast that thing would appreciate in value, and do the math. If somebody like your example purchased something at 100,000, a couple of years later it's at 200,000. They buy a property for 200,000. A good possibility that's going to appreciate more, possibly 400,000. So they basically get 200. If they purchase at 200, it appreciated 400. You're basically doubling that 33%, 66,000. So your 2026, with your example, they'd have to pay the 33,000, 15% haircut, but that a property they invest into appreciates in the same manner, they will be getting a complete exemption of about $66,000. So it's pretty much double.
Now, can they do multiple opportunity zone exchanges through up until 2026 and then still only pay that first down leg taxes with the 15% haircut? Or is it just a one-time transfer and you have to stay there with that money, and then in 2026 you're paying those taxes?
Your one-time transfer of like a singular capital gain. So like if you have one property that had capital gains for a specific amount and you place it in there, that's done. But if you had another property, you could you could place it into the fund if the fund's structured, to be receiving funds. That is like its own separate entity, like own timeline, everything. So you could, I'm not sure I'm phrasing it right. Like you could do multiple, but they're like undivided interests. Like with 1031, if someone's selling 3 properties and they want to take all the capital gains, reinvest it into like one property and just combine the exchanges, their 45-day and 180 days starts when the first property sells. So with opportunity zones, it's a bit different. It's more singular, individualized tax exemptions.
So for example, John Smith takes a duplex, sells it, buys a 5-plex in an opportunity zone. He should have the intention of just holding on to that 5-plex, not doing any more transfers. In 2026, he pays a little bit of taxes from that down leg, but now that 5-plex is worth $1 million. If he goes to sell that, he only pays the taxes on that initial down leg $200,000 sale. All that equity is tax-free.
Yeah, 2020-26 is the only taxes he'll have to pay, because in order to get the tax-free status, he still has to hold on to that property for at least 3 more years to hit 10 years. So the taxes they'll have to pay is basically on the initial property with a 15% haircut.
Got it. What are some of like the mechanics of the opportunity zone? Is it the same deal where we hit you up essentially while we're in escrow or after we close? How does that work?
I always appreciate while you're in escrow, because it's a little different with opportunity zones. 1031 exchanges, you're required by law to use a qualified intermediary. No party to the transaction can hold those funds. So if people don't call us in an appropriate amount of time, then we end up having a taxable event. With opportunity zones, though, it's the client can actually access the funds, which terrifies me. But the client can access the funds, but they don't have the 45-day rule. They still have 180 days to get that money into a fund, and then the fund has to go and acquire the real estate business interests or shares in the company, what have you. So opening escrow is call us, because a lot goes into it. Like even structuring, if the client doesn't want to go into someone else's fund, they want to set up their own fund and acquire the properties and run it themselves. Then we consult in helping them structure the fund, making sure they have all the right words to understand this rule and make sure they stay in compliance.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And is there a reason why an investor would want to do a 1031 exchange instead of an opportunity zone fund?
Yeah, simple. They don't have the cash to pay in 2026, or their capital gains is far too great, or they're not long-term investors. Like if you're a buy and hold guy, opportunity zones makes sense twice over. It is, hey, yes, you're going to have to pay those taxes on this property with a discount of 15%, but your next property, you don't have to pay a cent, and it's going to be completely tax-free, which is something rarely used by the IRS. So it's complete sense for someone who basically knows, okay, I don't have this cash, I won't be able to get it. But for a buy and hold, those like an opportunity zone that's their lane. Like this is the government's gift to them.
I was just thinking there might be 2 other reasons. Would you mind if I add them and you let me know if they're valid reasons?
Absolutely.
Perhaps they want to do multiple 1031 exchanges between now and 2026 in order to keep uplegging to a higher priced, higher valued property. That could be one, right?
Yeah. But remember, that's the short hold period, guys. Like 1031 is perfect for them. Like I'm not trying to hold on to this thing for 10 years, I think it's going to produce the appreciation that I need within 2. And those are the short hold period guys. But yeah, like I said, if they're not about that, buy it, hold it, keep the funds in the asset, then everyone is their best bet.
And then the only other reason that I could think is maybe their upleg property that they really, really want to buy is not in an opportunity zone.
Yeah, that's always the case. I mean, have that happen all the time. I mean, that's literally the reason for a reverse exchange. And a reverse exchange is basically when an investor finds a deal that's too good to be true. They want to buy it first, then sell the property that they already own and still have that become tax deferred. And that goes to a whole complex transaction. But that happens all the time where people are like, oh, it's too good to be true. But then we have to pull up the APN numbers and look on the U.S. Treasury website for what properties are in a opportunity zone. And then if it's just outside it, they're out of luck. But that's the whole point. And actually, you raise an even better point, because this is what we tell our clients. Should they start looking prior to even selling, let us know. Because if they're looking and they get their mind dead set and they don't know, no, that's not an opportunity zone, it could be a wasted energy.
So let's say me, for example, I'm looking right now. I got a property that I'm getting ready to put up for sale. I want to invest in an opportunity zone. Puerto Rico is really piquing my interest because I want to buy an Airbnb property there that I can, go live in too. In fact, I'm going to be hitting you up about it shortly. Where can I go to find a map or something like that where I can figure out where these opportunity zones are?
Well, we have a map on our website. You just go to growth1031.com or just type in Google qualified opportunity zone map, and it will easily pop up on Google. And the most verifiable one is with the link that pops up, the U.S. Treasury.
Okay, so either go to Lance's website, which is growth, GROWTH 1031, the number is 1031.com, or go to the U.S. Treasuries, just Google qualified opportunity zones and click the link. It's probably the first or second one, U.S. Treasuries, to find the map. We're going to recommend to all the investors out there to hit you up as soon as they've accepted an offer on a sale. Get going right away. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Simple. You can call us at 619-991-1031.
619-991-1031. I like that, bro. Let's go. Let's go. All right, Lance, my man. I appreciate it. Any tips you got for investors out there so that they don't mess this one up?
Yeah. If you're thinking about going to Opportunity Zone, please call us, because it's a new deferral program, but it's based off of 1031s. And it's kind of like the Wild Wild West, because the same people that actually designed the Opportunity Zones designed the healthcare plan, and that failed. And with Opportunity Zones, even this thing was released in 2017. People didn't even move on it till late 2018, mainly because of all the ambiguity. Like, okay, so what about this? What about this? And IRS and the U.S. Treasury secretaries were quiet for a while, and then they had to have a whole bunch of meetings, then release revisions. And then one of the biggest things that happened really on stage at the Staples Center, speaking thousands of investors about Opportunity Zones, the government shut down. It's like, sorry, all the clarity that we said we were going to give you in a week, we don't know when we're going to give it to you. So I've never seen so much kind of chaos in an investment community when you have companies like Morgan Stanley teeing up $60 billion to get in here, and Black Creek, multiple Opportunity Zone investments, upwards of $60 million and up. Everything just got halted. And to me, it's just a scary thing to see such institutional projects grind to a halt based on uncertainty and ambiguity. So the one thing I'll tell investors is call reliable sources. Don't just go with anyone, because one thing with Opportunity Zones, anyone can sell certified to become a fund. So you're going to have a bunch of guys running around saying, hey, I have an Opportunity Zone fund. Give me your money and we'll invest it into this property. But they structured the fund incorrectly. And then 10 years when you're going to get your tax-free benefit, you realize you can't because the guy incorporated as just an LLC, and he didn't check, please tax me as a corporation. And that one little thing can probably cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So just to recommend to everybody, one, give us a call. We'd love to just chat with you about it so that nobody steps in any hot water. But two, it is an extremely great opportunity. And I hate the fact they call it opportunity because it's redundant. And lastly, the biggest thing is, if you think about it, we're in the year 2019. This is the last year that you're going to be able to qualify for the 15%. So get moving, utilize it, and try to remember the spirit of this thing. Like, I know it's a great incentive for investors, but it really is kind of like a bit of a social program that's meant to have some impact, and people should take pride in that.
Absolutely. So to run that back, Lance's tips, great tips, are don't just be an internet warrior doing research. Call professionals. Use the likes of professionals like Lance. Try not to wait any longer. But at the same time, I want to stress to everybody, I asked Lance the other day, hey, am I too late? He said, absolutely not, but get on it, because some of the incentives like the 15% versus the 10% in 2026, that ends this year. However, the whole entire opportunity of opportunity zones does not end this year. So you do have time, but get on it if you got a sale coming up. Lance, I really appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on Life Worth Chasing. We're going to put the links to get in touch with Lance and his website in the show notes. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thanks for listening to Life Worth Chasing with me, your host, Chase Maher. If you like the show, smash that subscribe button. Leave me a rate and review. You know what? Screenshot the show, share it on Instagram, tag me at I am Chase Maher, and I'll repost it. There's hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and you've made the decision to listen to mine, which is so cool. I'll see you on the next show.